Dorsey Jackson Global.
I create. October 12th, 2012, is a day that's etched into the walls of my very unstable mind. The day began like every other, but by 6:15 p.m., we came to know the first of the many horrors that the coming week had in store for us. I can still hear her gut-wrenching screams every time I close my eyes. It's like the sounds are soldered into my soul, as no matter how many liters of alcohol I dump down my throat, I can still distinctively hear her screams ringing in my ears. It's taken a long time, but I've eventually come to live with it, as I know that I deserve every minute of this eternal torture that is now my life. The only thing I can do now is look back on that day and regret my actions, as with only 3 words, I single-handedly set off a chain of events that would eventually lead to both the beginning of a dreadful time and the end of my career at the SCP Foundation. To fully understand my story, I would need to take you 2 weeks back into the month of September, before that dreadful day had ever begun. The day was the 25th of September, 2012, and looking back on it now, I'm pretty sure that was one of the best days of my life. I joined the SCP Foundation in the year 2009, and in just 4 years, I managed to rise to the top. I was a brilliant scientist, and I carried out numerous successful operations and investigations. I also ushered in new, better, and more efficient methods to use during numerous operations. And with one successful case after another, it didn't take long for the higher-ups to promote me to an A-class personnel. At the time, the buzz around my name was huge, as there was already rumors going around about me meeting one of the 05 council members. Apparently, he or she had taken notice of my achievements, and they were also really impressed with my work. So they had recently decided to meet me in person, as I heard a day was supposedly being set. I remember being on cloud 9 that day, as I let all the attention go to my head. The praise and attention I was getting wasn't the only thing going on that week, as we had recently been receiving records of an anomalous object located on the outskirts of Karpova, a small village in Russia. Due to my recent amazing track record, I was quickly given the case by the higher-ups, so I immediately mobilized the mobile task forces, MTF Epsilon 6 to be exact, as they were going to go to Karpova, report back any sightings or effects of the anomaly, and finally secure and retrieve the object. Within hours, reports from the site were already being sent back to me to analyze, and as I got to work, I couldn't help but notice something really strange. For starters, the report stated that the small village was now deserted, as our field agents didn't see any living person there. Apparently, most of the people in the settlement had fled, and the remaining 56 people who were hurriedly left behind were all dead. Now, this wasn't what was strange to me, as anomalous objects usually left trails of dead bodies behind. No, that was pretty normal. What was strange was the way, or should I say, the manner in which these people died. The field agents' live reports, in addition to numerous videos and images, show that each of these victims died in a morbidly different way. For starters, the charred corpse of a 9-year-old girl was found in an abandoned burnt building. Another victim's bloated blue corpse was found by the side of a river. From what we could tell, he was a 36-year-old fisherman who had drowned. The third victim was found on the floor of her home. She had a huge bloody gash on her head, and all evidence made it clear that she bled to death. And as I kept going through all the reports, one by one, I realized that none of the 56 people died in the same way. I was confused, as most anomalous objects usually operate by a certain pattern, so this was a bit peculiar to me. By the time our field agents were done cleaning up the scene, the next thing was to identify and retrieve the anomalous object. A perimeter was formed around the village as it was being searched, and some field agents were sent out to the neighboring settlements to find and ask the people who fled some questions. It was pretty hard to pinpoint exactly what the object was, but after finding some residents of the village and asking them questions, we realized that the villagers who fled all feared a certain object, an object they called Igrok Diavola, a sentence that translated into the devil's player. After that conversation, and in addition to all the information we had received, we managed to retrieve the object in the basement of an abandoned building. The building was dated all the way back to the 1700s, and it was believed by the locals to be owned by an old cult that was once rampant around the area. Once the object was retrieved, contained, and secured, I immediately ordered for it to be sent to Site 300-14, Krasnoyarsk, Russia, which was both the closest and our only site in Russia. Before the object arrived, I managed to gather my team there for us to study and analyze the new anomaly. These people were the smartest people I knew, and I didn't do any case without them. I really needed them all to carry out a clean case, especially my right-hand woman, Amelia Scott. She wasn't just one of my best scientists. She was also one of my closest and oldest friends at the Foundation. We'd known each other since the beginning, and we both had worked our way up together. By the time she and the rest of my team arrived, we decided to take out a little time to exchange pleasantries and catch up before getting back to the task at hand. It took about 30 minutes for the object to arrive on site, and it didn't take long before we started our analysis and observation of the anomaly. And after the first hour had passed, these were my first impressions. For starters, the object was an old-timey phonograph machine. It looked pretty normal, as it basically had the appearance of every old version of the phonograph device, but that's where its normality stopped. You see, historical records show that the first phonograph was invented in the year 1877 by the brilliant scientist Thomas Edison. And while several improvements were made by Alexander Graham Bell in the following years, in addition to Amelie Berliner's further improvements and rebranding of the machine to the term gramophone, it is still historically proven that the story of the machine began in the year 1877. But when our scientists carried out the radiocarbon dating, a test used by scientists to determine the age of an object, the results of the test baffled us all, as it was revealed that the object's origin dated back to the 1500s, which was 300 years before the device was even conceived. Shocked at the impossible age of the device, we carried out the test again, and the answer remained the same. Now that we knew the absurd date was accurate, we decided to carry out numerous in-depth examinations of the device to further learn its mysteries. The device was made out of fine wood. We assumed it was mahogany, but we couldn't tell. The craftsmanship was spectacular, as it was well made, but the strange thing that stood out on the device was its disc. For starters, the color of the disc was a very distinctive hue, something I had never seen before. And when we analyzed the disc, we realized that the material bore no similarities to any element on Earth, as we had no idea what the disc was made of. We tried to remove the disc from the device, but all efforts made to remove it was impossible, as it seemed that the strange disc was either held tight by glue or soldered onto the machine. After thorough investigations were made on the device, we waited and watched for 14 hours to see its abnormal behavior or its anomalous characteristics, but nothing happened. We waited for 2 days straight before the object finally showed its strange characteristics. I think it was about noon when we noticed that the machine had started to wound itself. The hand crank, situated on the side of the machine, moved on its own for approximately 3 to 6 minutes before it stopped. After it was done, a few minutes of silence followed before what seemed like static noise started to shoot out of the sound horn. We all had perplexed looks on our faces as it sounded exactly like the static noise made by a radio or television set, and it was extremely strange hearing the sound coming from a phonograph device. The static noise went on for a few minutes before it abruptly stopped. A quick silence then filled the room for a few seconds before we began to hear a voice come out of the sound horn. The voice was definitely human, as it sounded like it belonged to an old news reporter. At first, the sound and audibility of the voice were low, but eventually, the message began to get clearer and clearer as we heard the words. Day, October 12th, 2012. Time of death, 6:15 p.m. Report. The victim was found morbidly impaled to the wall by metallic and glass shards. Efforts were made to rescue the victim, but it was all to no avail. Name. The victim was known as Static Noises. And then it stopped. Silence filled the room as we all pondered what we had just heard. The day was the 28th of September 2012, so we all wondered why the machine was reporting an incident concerning a day that hadn't happened yet. We decided to carry out more studies and observations on the device during the following week, but nothing else happened. In the past, I had normally dealt with anomalous objects that were constantly exhibiting strange characteristics. So seeing this one exhibiting one strange characteristic before going dormant was extremely odd. After more studies, I came to the conclusion that while it was an anomalous object, it wasn't the one causing the deaths, as I truly believed that there was a secondary part to this anomalous object. A part we didn't retrieve. And while putting together all our extensive research in addition to the object's behavior, I also came to the conclusion that the object, which was now identified as SCP-6690, was an auditory and musical anomaly. So I sent back another task force to Karpova, MTF ETA-11. They were the special task force who dealt with similar cases like this one, and I instructed them to check if there was any secondary part of SCP-6690, but all reports came back with nothing. Even though the reports that came back said there was nothing there, I was sure that my hypothesis was correct, so I ordered them to keep looking till they found something. As I kept on spreading my thoughts and sticking to my theory, I realized that not everyone was on the same page as me. Amelia and my other scientists weren't convinced that there was a secondary part of SCP-6690. She believed that we should wait till the date announced by SCP-6690 to see if anything happened before we made any conclusions. But I really didn't want to wait, as I had received news that morning that the date had finally been set for me to meet the member of 05 Council. It was scheduled to be on the 13th of October at Site 73 in Texas, USA. I knew I had to travel to the US on the 11th, which meant that I couldn't stay back in Russia to examine it. A lot of thoughts flew through my head at that moment, as I knew she was right, but I also knew what meeting a member of the 05 Council meant for my career, as I was certain that meeting alone would skyrocket my career to greater heights. So I let my ego get the best of me as I muttered the 3 words that would mark the beginning of a very dark time in my life. It's probably safe. Amelia didn't look too sold on my statement, so I tried to convince her by saying, "Come on, Amelia. Have I ever been wrong about these things?" She was still a bit uneasy, but she had been by my side all through my past triumphs. So I knew she trusted my word. It took a while, but she eventually agreed. I was ecstatic that we were finally on the same page, as I didn't like the division in our circle. And to further put her mind at peace, I said, "But if you're still uneasy or unsure, we can take it with us to Site 73 for further analysis." That statement finally settled everything as we immediately started making preparations to leave. We landed in the United States on the 11th of October 2012. I had already labeled SCP-6690 as a safe class object because, being a study facility, only safe classes were allowed on Site 73. The 12th of October came pretty quickly, and once the clock hit 12 a.m., we all watched and observed SCP-6690 for 18 hours straight, expecting it to do something, but absolutely nothing happened. It was 6 p.m. when I finally decided to start wrapping things up. I assumed that if nothing had happened this long, then nothing could possibly happen again. My theory was beginning to look more and more feasible as they all began to agree with my hypothesis. So I told them to ignore the 6:16 stated time, as I assured them again that if nothing happened in 18 hours, nothing was surely going to happen in the next 16 minutes. We were all tired, so everyone agreed as we packed up our equipment and began to leave. The sun started to set outside when I looked at Amelia and said, "I don't want to be that guy, but I told you so." We both laughed before she responded with, "Well, I can't argue with that. You were right and I admit it. Although, this does mean that your hypothesis on there being a secondary part of SCP-6690 was absolutely correct. I shouldn't have doubted you." I smiled at her before saying, "Don't worry, you were just being safe and a little bit paranoid, but I was 100% sure when I told you that SCP-6690 was safe. Look, it isn't the first anomaly to work in tandem with another. Maybe we missed something, or maybe there's a totally different anomaly that we didn't get back in Kharkova. But just give it some time and we'll eventually find it." She then nodded her head in affirmation as she said, "Yeah, you're right. You always are. Well, it's been a long day, but I still have to file the report. So let me do that, and then we can explore your big meeting tomorrow. You may not know it, but you're literally the Foundation's new superstar." We both laughed at our joke, and I smiled at her before she finally left the room. 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes had passed. We had gotten out some champagne as we were finally about to celebrate another victory, when out of nowhere, a huge explosion was heard. Blood-curdling screams were heard all through the building as we tried to pinpoint the origin of the explosion. And with no hesitation, I ran as fast as I could, knowing Amelia was there. I prayed for her to be safe, but when I finally reached my destination, the scene displayed before me made my heart drop into my stomach. Impaled on the wall was my friend Amelia, as a 15-inch metal shard was embedded in her abdomen. I also noticed that numerous glass shards were sticking out of her face and her right eye. The scene was ghastly, but I snapped myself out of it as I immediately rushed to get her down. But when I finally reached her, I hesitated, as I knew pulling out that shard would mean her instant death. Her screams began to die down as she had lost a lot of blood. I walked closer to her, and as I looked into her eyes, I could see the unimaginable pain she was going through as she struggled to speak. The Foundation's paramedics began to rush into the room, but within seconds, before they could do anything, she was already dead. Paralyzed with fear, I slowly looked at the clock on the wall, and to my absolute horror, it was 6:16 p.m. on the dot. The news of a dangerous SCP on site spread like wildfire, as Site 73 was put under lockdown. The 05 council member who had arrived a few hours earlier quickly canceled our meeting and was immediately escorted off the premises. Within minutes, my career was over, as it was revealed that I was the one who brought the supposed safe class object onto the premises. I was immediately given instructions by the higher-ups to finish my research of the object on site, as it was too unpredictable to transport, and when I was done, I was told to report in for the future of my career at the Foundation. It took about 3 weeks to wrap up the analysis of SCP-6690, and those 3 weeks became a literal living hell for all the people who worked at Site 73. No one was allowed to leave the site, as it was revealed that SCP-6690 had a wide reach regardless of where it was kept. So the higher-ups believed that we were already infected by whatever it was that SCP-6690 did to people. For the first time in the history of the SCP Foundation, class didn't matter, as we all automatically became Class D personnel overnight. We lost over 70 people in the span of 3 weeks, as SCP-6690's messages were now heard multiple times a week, and in some cases, multiple times a day. Just like in the case of Amelia Scott, one random person died at the exact same time and in the exact same manner reported by SCP-6690's messages. Tom Miller, who was one of my friends and a Class A personnel, was found dead with his head in his food on October 14th at 1:02 p.m. An autopsy revealed that his heart had ruptured in his chest. Clara Smith, a member of the research department, was also found dead on October 18th at 9 a.m. Shockingly, she was electrocuted by a safe socket that didn't bring out more than the standard 120 volts. Even when people didn't do anything dangerous, as many people decided that if they didn't move or if they hid somewhere safe, they wouldn't get killed. But unfortunately, their theory didn't work, as Frank Jackson, a Class B scientist who hid in the storage room, was found dead on the floor on October 20th, 2012, 3:19 p.m. His skull was smashed by a storage unit that had fallen on his head while he was sleeping. As the days went by, I eventually started wishing I would be the next one to die, but day after day, I was spared. We eventually started getting reports from outside Site 73, as the neighboring towns had started to report numerous strange deaths to the authorities. We managed to pinpoint the exact radius and reach of SCP-6690, as we found out that its effects were felt over 155 square miles, 401,448,157 square meters, meaning that, given enough time, it had the power to potentially kill thousands of people living in a small town. During the research, we also realized that SCP-6690 had the power to bend, alter, and manipulate matter itself. Because when we reviewed the death of Amelia Scott, we found out that the explosion was caused by a 9.5% concentration of methane gas in the air, particularly in the area behind a cabinet made of metal and glass. As a scientist, this was an extremely disturbing realization, as methane isn't part of the gases that make up the air around us, and it certainly doesn't appear randomly. Similar findings were also discovered when we reviewed the death of Tom Miller, as it was revealed that his blood pressure was increased to an extremely dangerous level. A level so high that it caused his heart to pretty much rupture and explode. More and more disturbing things were found out about SCP-6690. But by the end of the third week, we had started reaching a conclusion. By the time the analysis and our research were over, SCP-6690 was transported to a secure and undisclosed location. It was taken to a place very far away, but the place was still under the Foundation's reach, as I heard that the site was located about 10,000 miles in the frozen desert from Area 314, Iqaluit, Nunavut, Canada. It was particularly chosen for its isolated condition and lack of human life. It was transported there by MTF Lambda-5, as SCP-6690 was now considered a reality-bending anomaly. Its class was bumped up to Euclid, and even though some of the Foundation scientists argued that it should be kept under Keter class, it wasn't put there because I told them that while it was a bit difficult, SCP-6690 could be easily contained under the right circumstances. When the case was done, I was relieved of my position at the SCP Foundation. I was told by some of the higher-ups that they were thinking of something more severe as a punishment, and the only reason why I was let off easy was due to the great contributions I had given to the Foundation in the past. It's been over 10 years now, and I'm still reeling from the incident. I've contemplated committing suicide many times over the past few years, but I don't even have the balls to do that, because I know deep down that wherever I go, when I die, I can never look my friend Amelia Scott in the eyes. So I spend my days drinking myself into a stupor and counting down the days in this living nightmare that I used to call my life. SCP-6690, also known as the Devil's Player or the Voice of the Grim by survivors of Site-73's massacre. Class, Euclid. Bears the appearance of an old phonograph machine. Model, unknown. It is currently located in an undisclosed and isolated location about 10,000 miles from Area 314, Iqaluit, Nunavut, Canada. Reports state that it's being kept in a soundproof safe with dimensions measuring 152 by 91 by 143 centimeters. This was done because it is believed to dampen its reach and as a precaution in case any civilian comes within its range. SCP-6690 anomalous properties states that it has the ability to alter, bend, and manipulate matter in order to cause the deaths of people within its range. Strange messages or recordings are heard coming out from its sound horn, and with that, it details the day, time, and manner in which the victim will die, without revealing the individual's name. Reports also state that nothing can be done to stop the process once it has begun. Formerly thought to be a safe-class object, SCP-6690 took the lives of over 70 personnel during the Site-73 massacre. The costly mistake of the object being wrongly classed was the fault of the then-famed SCP scientist James Carter. He was relieved from his position, and his current whereabouts are still unknown. Narrated by Dorsey Jackson of Dorsey Jackson Global at Compound City. Be sure to like and subscribe.